Hi, David Dalton here again with the Indiana Department of Transportation. I am joined by Toni Mayo, our Director of Communications from our Fort Wayne district, and we're here to have a career pathway conversation. So thank you so much for taking time this morning to speak with me.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and get started. Can you tell me or share your career journey, kind of where you started to where you are now with INDOT?
I started out at Purdue,
Hmm.
and I have a degree, a Bachelor of Science in agriculture with a major in agronomy. And when I was started there at Purdue, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I had a passion for growing things.
Hmm.
And I knew that if there was any school that I could learn about growing things or teach them about growing, it was going to be Purdue. I went years later to get my master's degree, and which is in English. And from there, I was a adjunct professor in English. I was a journalist, and I took all these interesting skills. And when I got my first position at INDOT 14 years ago, just had my big anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. INDOT is a super place to work. I got to use all these different skills, and that's one of the things that I want to tell people that are, the high school people and people entering this workforce is every skill that you have will be utilized at some point in your career. So,
True.
you know,
Very true.
keep keep
Well,
keep building those skill sets.
agreed. Yeah, I think there's so many skills that translate, and especially when you look at our agency, there's just so many different kinds of positions.
Mhm.
So, kind of talking a little bit more about that, could you share what what a day to day? I know there's a new normal now, but for you as a
Right.
communications director of Fort Wayne, what would be a typical day in the life of?
Mm. The new normal, because of the COVID-19, is keeping everybody safe. It is social distancing. It is working remotely. As you can see, I'm in my little office at home. And so when I get up in the morning, I have set a routine, and I go for my walk and I have a cup of coffee, and at 9 o'clock is when I log on and I begin my day's work. At that point, what I'm doing is I'm triaging all the emails. As
Mhm.
a communications director, I get requests for information uh, from legislators, from school districts, from police officers, from the governor, from the mayor. I work with lots of
Mhm.
different municipalities. And when they need an answer, I pretty much drop what I'm doing and I do that. The other thing that I'm working on to keep us all connected while we're working apart, because our administration building that has about probably 100, 150 people in it, we, as I said, we are working remotely,
Mhm.
is I am helping people stay connected while we are apart. So we're working, my communications team, we are working on a weekly journal. So since I've been home, once a week, we put out a 2-3 page journal of how we are working and staying together, how we are keeping our team safe. So my hands are pretty full, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of what I do.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So, you talked about when you transitioned from agriculture to English um, in high school. When you were about to graduate, did you have any classes or any subjects that helped drive you in a particular direction that you could share? Something that inspired you to take that career path and
Right.
then to grow it.
Lots of science, lots of science classes, because soil is all about chemistry.
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to tell you, I was no whiz bang in math and chemistry. And as a matter of fact, you might, C average at Purdue, for me, man, that's an A if I get a C at Purdue, because it was hard. But one of the things, as today, looking back at my career, I am a professional civil servant, which means I
Hmm.
live to serve. And when I was in high school, I was in a lot of service groups, and the service groups were things that took care of society. They were, groups that, maybe did a food drive. They were, picking up litter. I was in an earth group, and which, as Earth Day was yesterday, picked up my fair share of some litter around. But service organizations where you can stretch yourself, join those, be with other people that are like-minded, that want to help. And, you'll never forget that. But again, when you are a professional civil servant, your who you work for, it's taxpayer, and you want to give them the best bang for their buck.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of everything was leading up to where you are now in a lot of ways, and I think that's really interesting when you put it in that perspective of, I was part of groups where I was serving people, I was serving the community, and now fast forward to where you are, I think that's really incredible. So if you could maybe go back in time and give yourself maybe one piece of advice, as a young learner or somebody that's going to graduate about, what would you say? What would you tell yourself?
Note to self. Nowadays, there's computers, there's networking. There are so many ways that you could really dive into a profession that you're interested in. And I'll give you a little example. So my son, I'll go brag on him. He's a surgeon. And when he was going through his college, he was just finishing up. He said, I'm going to create my own job shadow because I want to know, is this really good for me? So he called doctors in the Fort Wayne area, which I find hysterical, and said, can I job shadow with you? I'm like, it's unheard of. And he had 3 doctors that said, yeah, come with me. And you have to be a self-starter initiative. And you got to dive into whatever you think is interesting, because after you spend a couple of days in conversation with those professional people, you may decide it's not this, it's that. And if you don't spend the time and do the research, you really won't know if that's what's for you. So you have to really figure it out. Is this really for me? But you've got to do your homework.
Thank you so much for mentioning job shadows and those career exploration. And you bring up a good point, which I like to think about a lot. It's important to know what you want to do, but it's equally important to know what you don't want to do. And I think that was really well said. So what would you say would be one skill that you have to be successful in your job today?
Well, I don't really think it's fair, David, that you make me pinpoint one. I think that's cruel, unusual punishment for somebody that, like me, that likes to communicate. But you have to have follow through. You have to get the assignment, and you don't really say, not really for sure how. You need to say when. When do you want it done? That's the kind of employee I'm looking for. They don't come up with a lot of questions. Now, granted, as we are working through it, I'll answer all the questions, but you've got to have follow through, and you have to know at the very end, you sign your name on that because, that represents who you are. If you don't get it done, that also represents who you are.
Sure.
So, and listen, you must listen to what the assignment is.
Yeah, I definitely think having follow through and being able to listen and truly listen, I think those are critical skills, and those just don't translate to communications or marketing. I think those are used all over and in every position. So we're going to wrap up here in just a moment, but is there any general advice, and you've kind of touched on this in many ways throughout our conversation this morning, but advice that you would give a person about how to get a foot in the door, or what they, if they're not sure what they want to do and they're interested in communications, they're interested in INDOT or maybe other areas, what would you say? What advice would you give?
Well, you're falling right into my trap of what I wanted to talk about. two things. So when I was at Purdue, one of the ways that I funded myself to go through school is I, joined the Soil Conservation Service as a co-op student. And there was a lady, her name was Benny Sue Bragg. To this day, I can see her. I've tried to find her. And she is the one that gave me the foot into the door into civil service life, into the Soil Conservation Service. And I was just a kid from Jeffersonville and didn't really know anything about civil service. And she gave me a chance as a female to be in a man's world, which to this day, I'm still a female in a man's world. And let's just face it, roads, it's a man's world. But I encourage females to come into this man's world. I sit in a directorship position, and there are 10 directors and 2 are females. So I have a lot on my shoulder to help represent and take care of females. But the other thing I want you to know, David, is as a hiring manager, I look at all resumes. I'll give you an example. We're getting ready to hire a receptionist position. I went through 90 resumes. Wow. I picked out 6 that were applications that were great. I did 6 interviews, 6 phone call interviews. And from there, I was honest about what the salary is, what the duties are. I can't even tell you when you will start because of our COVID-19, because we want to keep everybody safe. I look at lots of different things of what I want as an employee. One thing is, I'm not really great with reports. I love reports, but I want somebody else to run them. I love design and flyers, but I don't want to design. I want that person to design. So I was looking for 2 really important skill sets, which I found. So I like to give the underdog an opportunity to interview and to come on with INDOT. I've hired probably 11 different individuals, and 2 of them, they didn't get to stay, but the rest of them have all been promoted. And so I pride myself that I get to train them, and what is it? Train them up on your shoulders. And so I hire young people. I'll hire people of color, and I want to give everybody a chance, like what Benny Sue Bragg gave me.
Well, thank you for that great answer, and I think the importance of having diversity and in a lot of different ways, and getting people excited and interested in knowing that there's opportunities. I think that's incredibly important because there's just a significant need for people to come into this industry wherever they go. And so I think, INDOT and transportation in general is just has so many different openings, and I'm excited to share this. So thank you so much for taking time this morning with me. I really, really appreciate it. And I can't wait to share this out. I've been asking one kind of off question, and I'm going to go ahead and ask you, because we talked about this before, and you said this was the hardest question that I put on there for you. But if you had a superpower,
right,
what would it be and why? And then we can wrap up.
Okay. It is to magnify my work. I reach 500 people now. So I would be magnifier lady or amplifier lady, because I know that I'm taking difficult information and I'm making it so it makes sense. And I love to write, got my writing skills, I love to write about science. And so writing about roads is, people don't realize how important they are. If you had to get on your in your car and drive down a dirt road, I don't think you'd like it. It's not efficient. It's not fun. And so the transportation system is assets. It is how we get from A to B safely, efficiently, and INDOT is responsible for your safety and your efficient travel, and for commerce to go back and forth. And so as amplifier woman, I would get my message to go farther.
Great. That is a great answer. You put a lot of thought into that. Thank you. Well,
Oh no, you're supposed to do this.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
again, I can't thank you enough for your time this morning. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.